Maybe the girlfriend helps. 5 words, spoken by the one man in Formula One with more insight into Lewis Hamilton's psychology than anyone else alive. And they landed exactly where Ferrari has spent all season refusing to go. Let's set the scene properly, because context is everything here. Barcelona, June the 14th, 2026. Hamilton has just won his first Grand Prix for Ferrari, beating his old team on the same afternoon their championship leader retired late with reliability trouble. It marked the first race of the entire season not won by a Mercedes driver. Standing in front of the cameras afterward isn't some neutral pundit reaching for a soundbite. It's Toto Wolff, the man who ran Hamilton's championship years at Mercedes, who oversaw 6 of his 7 world titles, who knows exactly what this driver looks like when something in his life has genuinely shifted versus when he's simply performing contentment for the cameras. Before we go further, if you're watching from outside the usual paddock hubs, tell us your country in the comments. Because a former rival team boss talking this openly about a driver's personal life is not something that happens often in this sport, and clearly it traveled. Here's what makes this moment worth dissecting, rather than just repeating as a headline clip. Wolff didn't start with the technical explanation. He built up to it in layers, the way someone does when they're being genuinely thoughtful rather than reciting a prepared line for the cameras. First, hard work, plain and simple. Then, the characteristics of the new generation of cars, the reduced bouncing, the more conventional aerodynamic feel that suits Hamilton's driving style better than the ground effect era ever did. This is back to more conventional driving in terms of aerodynamics and vehicle dynamics, Wolff said. Then the dynamics between Hamilton and his race engineer, which Wolff specifically described as looking good from the outside. And only after all of that, after working through the technical layer completely, Wolff arrived at the part that made headlines. "I saw him on the podium on the telly," he said. "That face shows me that he's very happy. Maybe the girlfriend helps. It helped me to have a partner that, you have a stable family life and they seem to be getting on really well." And then he went one step further than the quote everyone remembers. "I think it's all of those factors that put together the emotional, personal, and professional perspective," Wolff continued. "If you are in a good place, you win." That's not a joke tossed off at the end of a press conference. That's a complete theory of performance stated in full by someone who spent over a decade building championships around exactly that theory with this exact driver. Here's the interrogation this deserves. Question 1. Why is it Wolff, a rival team principal with every competitive reason to stay quiet about anything that might be helping a title rival, who becomes the first person in an official capacity to say this out loud, rather than anyone currently inside Ferrari? Question 2. Why does Wolff frame it not as gossip but as personal experience, comparing it directly to his own life? "It helped me to have a partner?" That's not speculation about someone else's relationship from a distance. That's a man drawing from his own marriage to explain what he's watching in a rival's driver, which is a very different kind of statement than paddock gossip. Question 3. If Wolff genuinely believes this and clearly isn't afraid to say so on the record, why has Fred Vasseur spent the entire season giving reporters nothing but engineering explanations for the exact same turnaround? We actually covered that Vasseur pattern in detail before. The small stone after small stone language, no single change that transformed everything. An answer built entirely out of software and process. Put that next to Wolff's answer, and the contrast is stark. One team boss, talking about a rival's driver, brings up the relationship unprompted, in detail, with warmth. The other team boss, talking about his own driver, avoids it entirely every single time he's asked, across an entire season of opportunities to say something similar. That's not a small, stylistic difference. That's a genuine gap in what 2 of the most experienced people in the sport are willing to say publicly about the exact same subject. Let's be fair to Vasseur for a second, because there's an obvious professional reason for the gap, and skipping it would make this one-sided in a way the material doesn't support. A team principal crediting his driver's love life for a championship push, on the record, opens up a can of questions no team wants to manage in real time. Every future press conference becomes about the relationship instead of the car. Every retirement, every bad qualifying session gets filtered back through that one quote by reporters looking for a follow-up. Wolff doesn't have that problem because Hamilton isn't his driver anymore. He can say what he actually thinks without any of the downstream consequences Vasseur would have to live with for the rest of the season. That difference in incentive alone might fully explain the silence from Maranello, and it's worth taking seriously rather than dismissing as evasion. But here's what that explanation doesn't erase. Wolff isn't just some outside observer with nothing at stake, offering a polite compliment to be gracious in defeat. He ran Hamilton for 12 years. He watched him win 6 championships together, the longest and most successful driver partnership of the modern era. If anyone in this sport has the pattern recognition to know what a genuinely happy Hamilton looks like versus a driver just performing happiness for cameras, it's the man standing in this exact spot, having watched that exact face in victory and defeat for over a decade. And his read, unprompted, delivered with warmth rather than mockery or condescension, was that the relationship is doing real work in this equation. Let's put this next to what we already know about the timeline, because it lines up with striking precision once you lay it out end to end. The Cotswolds getaway happened in February, kept deliberately quiet at first. By Barcelona in June, 4 months later, Hamilton has notched podiums in Monaco, Canada, and China, and now his first win. 4 months is roughly the window most people would expect for a genuinely stabilizing relationship to start showing up in someone's professional output. Not too fast to be dismissed as pure coincidence. Not too slow to be irrelevant to the story. Wolff's comment landed at almost exactly the moment the on-track data started supporting it. Here's the caso espejo worth drawing, because it sharpens everything about how Wolff actually operates as an observer of this specific driver. Compare Wolff's answer here to how he handled a completely different kind of question just weeks later, in Hungary, when Hamilton called himself useless after a brutal Q2 exit and suggested Ferrari should find another driver. In that moment, Wolff didn't reach for anything personal at all. He reached for character instead. "That is Lewis wearing his heart on his sleeve," he said. It's what he thought very much when he was asked after the session. It was very raw. He was doubting himself. He's been that emotionally transparent since he was a young boy or a young adult. So he's going to beat himself up. He's the GOAT, and he will always be the GOAT, and nobody is going to take that away. 2 completely different moments, separated by weeks, 2 completely different explanations, both true to how Wolff actually reads this driver in the moment he's watching. When things go well, he credits stability and personal happiness. When things go badly, he credits raw honesty and emotional transparency. That's not a man improvising talking points to fill airtime. That's a man who has genuinely studied Hamilton's psychology for over a decade and reaches for whichever true thing fits the specific moment in front of him. Now, the steel man for skepticism, because it deserves real weight here, rather than a dismissive mention. Wolff is a famously warm, generous public speaker, especially about a driver he clearly still cares for personally, even years after their professional split. It's entirely possible maybe the girlfriend helps was simply a throwaway line of genuine happiness for a friend's success, not a considered psychological verdict meant to carry the weight we're giving it here. People say nice things about people they love winning races, and warm color commentary is not the same as a scientific theory of performance. Reading deep analysis into a handful of casual words risks manufacturing a story where there's simply a man being kind on a good day for an old friend, but that reading doesn't fully explain why Wolff chose to build his answer in layers, technical first, then relational, arriving at the personal explanation almost as the conclusion of a genuine train of thought rather than an opening joke or a closing throwaway. And it doesn't explain why, months later, this line is still the one fans and journalists keep bringing back up every time Hamilton's form is discussed in any context. A true throwaway comment, forgotten within days, doesn't have this kind of staying power in the ongoing conversation around a driver's season. Let's talk about what actually happened to the championship math the same weekend this quote landed, because the stakes are worth stating plainly rather than left as background noise. Hamilton's Barcelona win cut his deficit to Antonelli down to 41 points. Russell's second-place finish that same day left him just 9 points behind Hamilton in the standings. In other words, the exact race where Wolff made this comment was also the race that turned Hamilton from a driver rebuilding his season into a driver genuinely inside the title conversation for the first time since his Ferrari move. The quote and the results arrived in the same 24 hours, from the same press conference, about the same driver, at the same inflection point in the championship. So here's where this actually leaves us, a rival team principal, the one man with the most genuine insight into what a happy Lewis Hamilton actually looks like, said publicly and unprompted that a relationship might be part of a championship turnaround. while the current team principal has spent the entire season saying nothing but software and small stones on the exact same topic. We're not going to tell you which explanation is more accurate, because certainty here would be dishonest, and neither Wolff's warmth nor Vassar's caution proves anything definitively on its own merit. What we can tell you is that when the person who knows Hamilton best chooses to say the quiet part out loud, and the person who currently employs him chooses not to across an entire season of opportunities, that gap is worth noticing, rather than smoothing over into a tidy single explanation. We covered the Kim Kardashian side of this story in full back when the relationship first went public, laying out the 6-month timeline from the Cotswolds to Barcelona in detail. And Wolff's comment here is the first time anyone with genuine insider credibility backed up what we laid out in that video. If you haven't seen it, that's the deeper dive this comment fits into. Zandvoort continues this weekend, and if Hamilton's form holds at the one circuit where he's never stood on a podium, we'll be back to ask whether Wolff's red is still holding up under the pressure of the second half of the season. Like this if you think Wolff's comment carries more weight than anything Ferrari has said all year. Comment which explanation you actually believe drives this turnaround, and subscribe so you're here for whatever comes out of Sunday. Until the next one.